everyday occurrences which we see in nature. We see these things, but normally we do not understand the deep significance of the incidents that happen in front of our eyes. Most of us have seen camels and they are eating bushes, but we never see nature in the way Sri Ramakrishna saw. His way of looking at nature was a different was totally different. He used to see he had a spiritual insight, and that is why Swamiji once said that we got our education by enrolling ourselves in universities, schools, colleges. But for Sri Ramakrishna, his only university was nature. So he learnt all his facts from nature, from Prakriti. So anything that happens in Prakriti, Sri Ramakrishna's power of observation was so nice and so insightful that he could understand the deeper significance and use them as wonderful imageries to convey a particular deep spiritual truth, which would be very difficult to understand otherwise. And they keep your memory fresh. For example, once you try to understand what that imagery signifies, the next time you see that particular imagery, for instance, here he says a camel likes thorny bushes. So most of us, at least if not, if most of us have seen camels, especially those who live near deserts. In Gujarat, we used to see a lot of camels, but many people might have seen camels only in zoo or maybe in movies or some National Geographic or something. But the I don't know where Sri Krishna saw camels, because in Calcutta, except for Alipur Zoo, I don't think there were camels. A camel is not a very common domesticated animal as it is in western part of India. But anyway, he knew about the camel, and he also knew that when camel eats thorny bushes, normally they have to eat thorny bushes, because in the western part of India, which is practically very dry, rainfall is less, there is very little greenery. So most of the plants that survive are thorny bushes. You'll hardly find anything green in them. So whatever is there, the camels have to be satisfied by eating that. They won't get fresh leaves or foliage there. It is very difficult. So naturally, it has to the camel has to eat whatever is available, and most probably in the deserts only thorny bushes are available, and it has to satisfy its hunger that way. But when it eats the thorny bushes, though it has a very thick tongue and very sharp teeth, but still the mouth bleeds, because the tongue starts bleeding, the tongue and the other parts of the mouth, because of the thorns in the uh, its food, whatever it eats, the branches of the trees. There are a lot of thorns, and peculiarly when it eats these thorns, the mouth bleeds, but it does not stop. It thinks that blood has its own taste. So the more the mouth bleeds, it thinks it is the juice of the plant, or maybe even if it realizes that it's own blood, it can't help. It has to eat because of the hunger. It has to go on eating. It can't stop. So similarly, Sri Ramakrishna says, somebody would have asked this question: if there is so much suffering, why do worldly people continue to live in the world? Live in the world in the sense, endure all the suffering, that so much of agony is there, but still they entangle themselves in more and more problems which are not their own. So uh, we see so many people sometimes have that this peculiar knack of getting involved in things which really they should not be involved in. If they have sufficient problems of their own, but their very nature, their very inquisitive nature and sociable, it is called social nature. They are very social, likes to mix, but they don't realize along with that comes a lot of sorrow and agony. So with attachment comes a strange kind of sorrow also. So attachment normally leads, attachment can be good if it is positive, but otherwise it leads to sorrow. So Sri Ram Krishna says, just like this camel, though it is bleeding, but it continues to eat because it is hungry, it will not stop. So also worldly people suffer from so much of agony, so much sorrow, yet they revert back to the old self soon. They know now and then they get vairagya when they suffer. Sri Ramakrishna says, suppose a man's wife has died or she has proved unfaithful to him, then but still he marries again. Perhaps he has lost a son and suffered much sorrow, but he forgets all this in a few days. The mother of the boy, beside herself with grief, after a few days, the son has died. Maybe that sorrow will last, but that is temporary. She ties up her hair again and bedecks herself with jewelry and starts the social functions as she did before. In the same way, the people spend all they have on the marriage of their daughters. This is a typical Indian problem. Normally, we don't see these things in other countries, but in India, marriage of a daughter is a very, very big problem for most of the middle class and uh, poor, uh, I mean, underprivileged people. If they have daughters, it's very difficult to marry them off. So he says they have to spend, some people have to spend, if they have a few daughters, they have to spend a lot of money. So Sri Ram Krishna says here, though people spend all they have on the marriage of their daughters, they continue giving birth to more and more children year after year. Some people think that maybe they'll get one son, and you'll find so many daughters born, and then the burden increases. They lose everything in litigation, and there are some other people who are quarrelsome in nature. They lose everything in litigation, and yet they go again and again to the court. They can't feed the children they have, neither can they educate them, nor can they uh, neither can they educate them, nor can they look after them properly. Still, they will have more children every year. So, Sri Ram Krishna, to convey to the people who have assembled there the strange behavior which people exhibit in the world, knowing that it is full of suffering, as opposed to the Gita teaching which says Anityam Asukham Lokam Imam Prapya Bhajasvamam. So these are all great quotes from our scriptures which give us the warning, but people don't pay heed to that warning. And though the just as the camel bleeds, even if bleeding is there, the camel feels that it has to continue to eat those thorns. Then Sri Ramakrishna gives another wonderful example of that of a snake. It's trying to swallow a mole. The snake can neither swallow the mole nor give it up. Once it gobbles up, mostly you will find sometimes it can be very painful to these snakes. They sometimes gobble up a mole or a rat or any uh, small animal which is slightly bigger in size, and then they find it so difficult to swallow it. The bound soul, but at the same time, it cannot, the snake cannot give it up also. It cannot spit it out because it has already swallowed it. And then it has to very painfully, you see these pythons and all, sometimes they uh, swallow large animals. And then they have to rest for some time because they can't move. So they have to go to a safe place so that other animals don't attack it. And they find it so difficult to digest what they have taken. The bound soul, though it realizes, then Sri Ramakrishna giving this wonderful example of a snake trying to swallow a mole, but not able to swallow it nor throw it out. So the bound soul may have realized, even if he has realized intellectually by reading of scriptures, by constant satsang, people no doubt get an idea that it is these things are wearing us away. In the sense, it is causing a lot of trouble. It is likely to cause a lot of trouble. So the bound soul, though it has realized that there is no substance to the world and that it is like a hog pump. So the third example Sri Ramakrishna is giving. Hog pump has mostly a seed inside and skin. There is very little flesh. So if you go on eating that hog plum, you will be eating only the outer skin. You won't get a substantial amount of flesh attached to that seed. The rest of it is seed, so you have to throw it. Stone means the seed inside. So it is nothing but stone and skin, yet he cannot give it up and cannot turn his mind to God. That means the world is like a hog plum. So hog plum is something where the useless things are more, and the enjoyment that we seek in the world is like that hog plum. It is just skin. There's no substance, no real joy in that. There is more pain. The stone is compared to the pain. So not only it is painful, but it is useless also. It has to be thrown. But we still go on eating this hog palm. That is what Sri Ramakrishna is saying. And that occupation, this eating of the hog plum, will not enable him, will not uh, uh, enable him to turn his mind towards God. So that's why he says people are so occupied eating this hog plum that though they are not getting any nutrition or any substance from by eating that, most of it is they have to throw it away. So it's just a futile exercise. They won't benefit, but still they'll go on doing the same. Next, he gives another example. A 50-year-old relative, of course, in those days, 50 means it is a age of retirement. People, if they survive up to 50, it was a great thing. All of them, because of so many, now the lifespan has increased. But in those days, 50-year means a practically a uh, time when everybody should retire or embrace Vanaprastha. A 50-year-old relative of Keshav Sen was playing cards, as if the time was not yet ripe for him to think of God. So for Sri Ramakrishna, a commonplace incident or a commonplace pastime which millions and millions of people in the world practice or spend their time in, like playing cards and many other pastimes are there. In fact, if you go to some old age home and people are in fact to keep them busy, they are encouraged to play these things. That is because there is no idea of meditation or calling on remembering God, because that is not part of our culture anymore. Not only in the West, but even in India, you will find there is in Gujarat we saw there are a lot of such associations for or places where old people normally they would not like to stay in a joint home because the younger members of the family want their own privacy. So these old men used to struggle, and there was such a great demand that in Rajkot Ashrama they requested us, "Can you give us a place?" I said, "What will you do? Shall we have satsang?" No, he said. They said, "No, we will have some meeting." I said, "What will you do in the meeting?" So these old people, he said, "No, we will all come together and then we'll play something." And I said, "This is not the time. Our ashrama is not a place where you will come and play cards. This is not a place for sport. If you come and you can come to the big shrine. We have prayer halls. We'll open the meditation hall for you. There were temple prayer hall, plus there was a separate meditation room in the campus. I said you people can sit there, and we'll arrange for some reading and other things." So they said, no, 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 then people will not come. They'll come if some kind of social pastime is arranged for them. That is the only way you can attract. I said, no, we can't attract. Our purpose of starting an ashrama is not to uh, create facilities for such pastimes. That anyway you are doing at home. But unfortunately, even at home, these old people are criticized. So they have associations. A lot of countries have this where old people gather together. So Sri Ramakrishna must have seen, visited Keshav, and normally he would expect, especially people when uh, they have retired and they have nothing else to do, he expected them to think of God because now they don't have any responsibility. So he says, as if the time was not yet ripe for him to think of God. Normally, our society was designed or planned in such a way that after Grahastha which ended quite early, people were encouraged to take Vanaprastha before even thinking of retiring or taking up sannyasa. So, sannyasa was also there for householders in some form, may not be staying in a monastery, but sannyasa, at least mental sannyasa, was there. But before that, they had to make preparations by leading a life of vanaprastha, where they had to, if there were facilities, if they could go into solitude and meditate, it is fine. Otherwise, even in their own homes, they were supposed to do some swadhyaya, read the holy books, and meditate, and all those things. So, Sri Ramakrishna was saying, uh, he visited, perhaps he might have visited some Keshav Chandra Sen's relative's house, and he says he is 50 years old. Now 50 years people are still earning and still busy with so many problems of the world. But in those days, of course, the lifespan was less. So 50, Sri Ramakrishna himself passed away before he could complete 50. He took Mahasamadhi before that. So 50 was a ripe old age, and Swamiji calls him an old man. Sri Ramakrishna, he used to sometimes say that old man, Swamiji used to refer to him. So the time was not yet ripe for him to think of God. That shocked Sri Ramakrishna. He thought, at least at this age, the young age, we understand people have many problems, they have to earn a living, search for a job. In the midst of that, even the young householder devotees who used to come, Master Masha was quite young. He was hardly 30, in his late 30s perhaps, or even younger than that. And all the other people who had married quite early, the householder devotees, they were quite busy, but at the same time, they would make some time to come to Dakshineshwar or in their own homes, do some kind of worship. So, for Sri Ramakrishna, it was something shocking that somebody is playing cards at the age of 50. So he says, as if it is something, uh, such a great sin he is committing. A 50-year-old relative of Keshav Sen was playing cards as if the time was not yet ripe for him to think of God. Then he says, then he goes on giving examples. Whenever he takes up a particular point or a particular point he has to stress, he will give so many examples that the people who are present there, they are most probably they will never most like they are most unlikely to forget because the examples are so, the imagery is so powerful, and the way Sri Ramakrishna used to tell those things. So they used to hear with rapt attention, and he used to give these wonderful imageries which used to stick to their minds. That is what happened. That is how Master Mashe, after going home, could recollect all this. Perhaps he meditated on the camel and the camel eating, and that created such a wonderful impression on the minds of uh, sincere devotees like Master Mashe that slowly they started getting a kind of, they started developing a detachment from worldly pursuits, and then they became more and more spiritually inclined. So here Sri Ramakrishna now gives another example of the common worm. He says there is another sign, yet another sign of a bound soul, a soul which is bound to the world. If he is lifted from worldly life, suppose by some chance he is taken away for uh, or just lifted up and taken to another atmosphere, to a spiritual environment, he will pine away to death. So Sri Ramakrishna here explains, though many people come with, some of the devotees used to come to Dakshineshwar, they used to say, after a few minutes, they will say, "Oh, I don't want to sit in Sri Ramakrishna's room or in that group." Some devotees, they would have accompanied, but they were more interested in other things. So they will say, "We will wait for you in the boat." They would have hired a boat and come. Said, "You finish your talk." For them, it was very suffocating. Just like the worm, if he is removed from a filthy environment, and he says he will pine away to death. The worm that lives in dung, cow dung or any other dirty place, only feels happy there. Only there does it thrive. If you put that worm in a pot of rice, it will die. So now with this wonderful imagery, though he is making people laugh, giving these wonderful examples, but still you will find that Sri Ramakrishna's imagery, the word picture that he creates, the imagery that he creates, the parable that he tells with lot of humor and other things, though people are enjoying that as some humorous story, but people those who are sincere like M would perhaps go home and meditate on these wonderful examples, because nothing that Sri Ramakrishna uttered was insignificant. His center of his personality was God consciousness. He was filled with God inside, outside, everywhere. So that is the reason whatever he saw in Prakriti, most ordinary incidents were transformed into extraordinary experiences for him. And he shared those experiences in his unique way. So for him, the, his way of teaching, his university was the university of Prakriti. Prakriti taught him all that was necessary. Even a worm taught him something. A worm which is struggling to survive, if it is brought from garbage or filth and it is picked up and put it in a pot of rice, that worm dies. It dies because it cannot survive in these conditions. It has been used to live in the midst of filth. So also Sri Ramakrishna says, even if you forcibly take a worldly person and force him to take him to a spiritual environment, you try to lift him, he will pine, he will not survive there. He will either escape or he would not be able to tolerate. So next we come to the conversation is going on, but suddenly M is quoting the 35th verse from the 6th chapter of the Gita, Asamshayam, about the difficulty to control the mind, because mind control is intimately related to spiritual pursuits and growth. It is easy to say that one should not find, I mean, get more and more absorbed, but it is not out of our own choice that we get caught in the uh, affairs of the world. It's not a matter of our choice. It is because our minds, right from childhood, we were not trained to control our mind and place it where we want. So our minds are very rarely under our control. So they just go, all the sense perceptions that is fed to the mind, the reactive mind, it just reacts and then acts according to its instinct. So the we have not developed that buddhi which helps us to use intuition. So he says why it is so difficult. Arjuna, Sri Krishna is telling Arjuna, "O mighty armed, asamshayam mahabaho." Mahabaho means one who is very strong, mighty armed, one who has very strong arms. Asamshayam mahabaho mano durnigraham chalam means I know it is so difficult. It is very difficult, restless and hard to control. But abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena cha griyate. This mind can be controlled. Griyate means can be controlled. Control means can be grasped. That is the idea. Grahana means to take, to grasp. So to hold the mind together, it can be controlled only by practice and non-attachment. Both are two sides of the same coin. Abhyasa without vairagya is not possible. Abhyasa becomes fruitless. And vairagya without abhyasa, that is also very important. Some people practice vairagya just for the sake of vairagya. They like to torture their body, they like to do this, do that, just to get some name and fame that, see, I don't do this, I don't do that, I fast so many times a year. There are so many people who practice vairagya or practice some kind of austerity and just to show the people that I live a simple life. But there is no abhyasa. In that case also, mind is difficult to control. So Sri Krishna is very particular. Abhyasena tu kaunteya. Vairagena cha. Cha means and. So just abhyasa will not do. Abhyasa, even if you do abhyasa, or if one is constantly doing prayers, japa and all those things. But along with that, on the other side of the coin is vairagya. So both have to go together. So that's why he says abhyasa also can mean viveka, the discrimination. Abhyasa doesn't just mean doing japa or prayer. Any type of sadhana is abhyasa. If you are a jnani, then you will discriminate between nitya nitya vastu viveka we will do. Otherwise, you we will be practicing devotional songs or devotions and other things. That is another type of abhyasa. So abhyasa can mean anything, and vairagya means a sort of detachment or non-attachment which has to be voluntarily practiced. So a voluntary practice of vairagya with the aim of practicing or with the aim of doing abhyasa. That is a very important point. Abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena cha. Abhyasa and cha is and vairagya. Both are necessary. So after quoting this, uh, after quoting this particular verse from the Gita, because the conversation is going on, but M thought it is the right time to introduce this shloka because the conversation that follows now will be based on this theme. That is why the heading is given Deep Dispassion and Bound Souls. Then Sri Ramakrishna now is telling Vijay, or Vijay is asking Sri Ramakrishna one question, and in reply, he is replying to Vijay, and Vijay's question is, what must be the state of mind for a bound soul to attain liberation? So he says, we agree that these are the signs of a bound soul, that he is like a worm who cannot stand the spiritual environment. He has to go back to his worldly ways like a worm. Then Sri Ramakrishna gave another example. They are all wonderful examples worth remembering. The moment you see a camel, uh, it should strike you. That is the idea behind all this reading and abhyasa. Abhyasa can also be reading, listening. So constantly listening, at least we can hope that someday some of these imageries will come to our help. They can they can put us again on the track if we have missed. That is why we started the Thursday Great Master class, because quite a few disciples, initiated by anybody. There are many initiated disciples in this country and others. So during our regular Friday, Saturday, Holy Mother and Gita and classes, there certain questions were being asked. Then I found that though we are reading the Gospel, the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, his message cannot be separated from his life. As Mahatma Gandhi used to say, my life is my message. So, a message will not be powerful, will not be effective if it doesn't have the backing of a life based on that message. So, whatever Sri Ramakrishna preached, definitely he has practiced it before he has started preaching it. Whatever he speaks now, or in the gospel or anywhere else, is based on his personal experience or his own life. So it is imperative, especially for those who are initiated, to thoroughly read the Great Master or the Divine Play. It has been recently retranslated, but I still feel it's a very good book, The Divine Play of Sri Ramakrishna and his Divine Play. And the language is more lucid, and uh, the language is a bit modern, whereas the great master's language is a bit Victorian English, the old type of British English which Swami Jagadanand used. But there is something unique in the great master as it is translated by our Swami Jagadanand because our revered Swami Atmastanand Maharaj, the 15th president, who had the fortune to learn scriptures and serve him, and even he was present when he attained Mahasamadhi in Almora. So he was staying in Almora, and Jagadanand was translating the great master. So Atmastanji Maharaj, when we were brahmacharis, was very keen that every brahmachari should first read the great master along with the gospel, which of course we did every day. So he believed that this is a companion, and everybody agrees with that, that this great master is a companion volume to the gospel, because the gospel does not give you the entire biography. There will be some biographical details you can get, because Sri Ramakrishna himself sometimes says, I did this, I did that, I did this sadhana, I did that, but it's not connected. Whereas Swami Shardanandji, when he wrote the Leela Prasang, if you have attended the two talks on the great master, why he wrote the third volume first, it becomes so important to understand the message of Sri Ramakrishna in the light of his own life. And not only his biography, but his biography as interpreted and as explained in such a powerful way by none other than Swami Shardananda. And Swami Shardanandji says, there is somebody asked him, you say that unless you experience certain things, you should not be writing or even speaking about it. He says, whatever I have written in the great master, none, most of the things, I mean, all of these things I've written only after experiencing it myself. So, by the grace of Sri Ramakrishna and also Holy Mother, who was constantly giving him the spiritual sustenance to write this book has become a classic. So, that is why, especially to those who have been initiated, it's imperative to read the great master, because it doesn't make any sense to meditate on Sri Ramakrishna without understanding his life in depth. Because Leela Chintana, the Abhyasa which we are speaking of here, and Vairagya is something different. But when you, even for Abhyasa, you need to understand in detail, not just a cursory glance at the different events of his life. That is not enough, because then our devotion to our Ishta does not increase. It can increase if we understand as Swami Shardanji has mentioned in the introduction to the Great Master, he has mentioned that Janma Karma Cha Me Divyam, one who understands my Janma and Karma. By that we mean the Great Master and the Gospel. Karma is the different conversations that took place, because Sri Ramakrishna, no other, most of his activities were restricted to this. Unlike Sri Krishna, who was also a kingmaker and he did so many things other than uh, preaching the Gita. But here Sri Ramakrishna had come in a very sattvic form. So his idea was, as Swamiji says, this Sri Ramakrishna had converted himself to pure sattva, the pure thoughts. So that is his greatest gift to us. So his message or his karma, Janma and Karma. Janma means birth and its biographical, his biographical details. So one who has to, Sri Krishna says, unless you understand Janma and Karma of a divine incarnation, you cannot possibly meditate on him. Even if we meditate, it will be incomplete. So that is why this verse, Abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyana. So Abhyasa, to attain liberation, to get moksha, one has to have a proper and systematic abhyasa and also vairagya. Now, what this vairagya is, what this dispassion is, he is trying to explain. So, this dispassion, Sri Ramakrishna says, when one develops deep dispassion by the grace of God, one can be freed from the attachment to lust and greed. Now, there are two types of dispassion Sri Ramakrishna is speaking of here. While describing Abhyasa and Vairagya, he says there are two types of dispassions which are which are part and parcel of the sadhaka. Some people have deep dispassion and some have mild dispassion. But in any case, dispassion is required, Vairagya is required, otherwise Abhyasa doesn't bear proper fruit. So he says, only when one develops deep dispassion by the grace of God, one can be freed from the attachment to lust and greed. That is telling Vijay. So he is asking him, how can we get moksha? And what must be the state of mind of a person who, a bound soul who has to get this moksha? So how do we know that we are on our way to freedom? So he says mild dispassion is to let whatever is to continue as it is and go on repeating the name. Now even this we don't do. Even this is so difficult to let go everything. We keep praying to God or maybe going here, going there to manipulate things and so that things go our way. We just don't even have this kind of mild dispassion where we let whatever is to continue. Just don't bother. Let things come. We will face it. And then go on repeating the name, thinking that one day we will get bhakti, we will get mukti. That is, even that, it is very difficult, but Sri Ramakrishna says that is mild dispassion. So for most of us, even a mild dispassion is fine. That we just take things as they come. It is very simple, but it's very difficult to practice. We want things to happen the way we want them to happen. We don't allow them to happen. We try to interfere. We try to interfere in the play of Prakriti. So much so that then we have to get blows and get disillusionment. But here Sri Ramakrishna says one who has mild dispassion, at least he does something good. He allows things to happen. Like that person who was saying Ramer Icha, whatever has happened by the Icha of Rama. That doesn't mean one has to be a fatalist and not try anything at all. But one need not be unnecessarily restless if the results which one want in life we don't get. We may not get all the results what we deserve, but still we should not lose faith. But that, according to Sri Ramakrishna, is mild dispassion. It is not even a strong dispassion. Because he says a man with mild dispassion allows things to happen, let things happen, and then he, whenever he gets a chance, he thinks of God and goes on, just is happy to repeat the name of God. So is a lukewarm type of devotion, a mild devotion. But he says, in one who has this deep dispassion, the prana becomes the life breath. Prana here means the life breath. Becomes restless for God like a mother restless for the child in her womb. Sri Ramakrishna, of course, used to get a feeling that he said, suppose somebody tries to drown you, how do you gasp for breath? You feel breathless. So, does your prana yearn for God that way? Then you can easily get moksha. A person who has deep dispassion does not want anything but God. The person sees the world as a deep well and feels that he is drowning in it. He literally gets that feeling. It's something which one has to acquire. It's not very common. It cannot be uh, cultivated. Of course, it can be cultivated slowly over a period of time. We can pray for the grace of the Lord and say that why don't we feel the need to have that this kind of dispassion. Obviously, none of us feels that this world is a deep well and that we are drowning. We never think unless something serious happens and we suffer a lot. Only then then we start feeling that something is wrong and we are drowning. Otherwise, who will treat his relatives as venomous snakes? And this imagery, you have to understand what strong imagery Sri Ramakrishna is using here. Vijay Krishna Goswami obviously is a preacher, but there were other householder disciples sitting there. But Sri Krishna doesn't mind because he wants them now and then to give an injection. So he says, look, he looks upon relatives as venomous snakes and wants to run away from them. Now you can imagine if you tell this to anybody who is a very sociable type of person, he obviously doesn't see his relatives or his friends and other people as venomous snakes. That kind of dispassion is so rare. Leave alone feeling them as venomous snakes. We do not even know if they have bitten us, and repeatedly getting bitten by these snakes, we go to enjoy or have their company. And but there are some people who feels that is drowning in a well. The world is like a deep well. Once he falls, he will not be able to escape, nor does he nor does he want to be exposed to his relatives whom he feels are as venomous snakes, who will uh, at the least instigation, they'll pour their venom upon you and wants to run away from them. And he does run away. He doesn't think, let me first make arrangements for my family and then I will think of God. He has great resolve. Now, this deep dispassion, uh, we remember once Swami Atmasanji Maharaj told us this wonderful story of Swami Jagadanandji, who was a quite senior person when he joined the order, but he was a disciple of Holy Mother. But he was one who was very scholarly, had abhyasa, he was practicing Jnana Yoga, practicing Vedanta, and at the same time he had this Vairagya also. But perhaps that deep dispassion had not come. So one day it so happened, this was told to us by Revered Atmasanji Maharaj himself, that one day somebody came and he was teaching Vedanta. Many of his students were inspired and they joined the Ramakrishna order also and became monks. But he joined himself at a quite a slightly older age. In any case, he was preaching, and one young man who was listening very intently and he was talking highly of this Vairagya and what Vedanta says, because the path of Jnana is the most difficult. It may be very easy to intellectually appreciate and understand the wonderful talks on Advait Vedanta and Vedanta in general. There are so many talks now are available. There's very wonderful way of expounding these things. So Jagadanji was one of them, and there was usually there used to be a huge crowd. A lot of people, young people, used to come, and many were inspired by his talk. And most of the people, as usual, would not take it seriously because Vedanta is something. If it is good to listen to these talks, but when you somebody tells you to take it seriously, it becomes very painful because we have to part away with many things which we don't like. So it is more convenient for us to talk Vedanta and listen to Vedanta rather than practice Vedanta. So the same thing Jagadanji was explaining, and one young man got so inspired and he asked him, just stood up. He said, are you sure what you are saying is true? Do you believe it? Do you say it with conviction? And there was a big crowd there, it seems. There were a lot of other students. And this young person was really keen to know if these things are true, then what the hell I am doing in this world? If these things are true, why am I wasting my time? So that inspired Jagadananda, who was in fact teaching this young lad. When this lad asked, do you, sir, really believe that this is true? Is it so urgent? He was perhaps explaining some verse where Shankaracharya talks about deep dispassion. In those days, they had very long hair. And Shankaracharya gives the example in Vivek Chudamani and many other commenting in many of his commentaries. The explanation, the imagery which Shankaracharya gives of deep dispassion is that a person's long hair has suddenly caught fire and the whole hair is burning and he is desperate to douse it with water and somehow stop that fire. Is trying desperately. So that feeling one should have for the world. So he was perhaps explaining such intense verses of dispassion by Shankaracharya, and this young man got up and said, uh, is it a matter of your own experience? He wanted to know, do you really feel it sometimes like this? That struck that imagery which Swami Jagadanand, he was not Swami at that time, he was just a Vedantic teacher, a great scholar. That struck him so much that he immediately left his house. Perhaps he was married, I'm not very sure, but he was living in the household, quite a senior person, and he left and went and joined the Ramakrishna order. Later on, he became a very great and respectable monk of our order, and he was requested and he took upon himself the task of translating Sri Sri Ramakrishna Leela Prasanga into from Bengali into English, and that is the great master which was first published in 2 volumes. Now it is also available in 1 volume. So this idea, what deep dispassion is, has I mean, Sri Ramakrishna is trying to tell Vijay Krishna Goswami, who obviously is a great Vedantin and he was a very sincere sadhaka also. Sri Ramakrishna knew that. But somehow he wanted, because he was involved in the split of Brahmo Samaj, a little bit of worldly problems where he had to settle all those issues. So he knew that I have to inspire this Vijay Krishna Goswami. So he's telling Vijay Krishna Goswami, listen what deep dispassion is like. And then he says, listen to a story, another imagery. Once there was a drought in a certain part of the country. All the farmers were busy digging canals to bring water from a distance. One farmer had great determination. He resolved that he would go on digging until water from the river flowed along his whole canal. In those days, it was easy because there was no pipes and other things. Uh, the fields which were at a lower level. So from the river to through the canal to the field, there were certain things which used to block. So if the water level goes down in the river, they had to dig the canal a little deeper so that the water can flow by gravity. So that he said he will continue to dig until water from the river flowed along his whole canal. When the time came for his bath, normally the food used to be sent. Such farmers they had small plots of land and they could not go home. Homes were not usually very far. So the daughter or some woman of the family would bring some oil. Normally in Bengal at least, it was a very common practice to apply oil on the whole body before taking bath. So the time came for his bath and the wife of that farmer sent some water, sent the daughter with some oil and uh, food also. And he said, "You, it's time for your bath. If you don't take the bath, normally lunch would be taken after the bath. Father, it's time for your bath. Massage the body with oil and take your bath." Then he got irritated and said, "Please go away. I have some work to do." It was past midday and the farmer was still at work in his field. He had forgotten all about his bath, his food, and other things. Now his wife came to the field and said, "Why haven't you taken your bath? Your rice is getting cold. You always overdo things. If the work is not finished yet, do it tomorrow or do it after your meal." Taking a spade in hand, the farmer drove her off, scolding and shouting, "You have no sense. There's been no rain. There's no crop. What will the children eat? Without food, we will all starve to death. I have vowed that I will bring water to the field today. After that only I will think about bathing and eating." Seeing his determination, the wife immediately left. She knew the husband would not come. He is determined to do what he has resolved. He has taken a vow. Seeing the farmer worked very hard throughout the day, joined the canal to the river in the evening. Then he sat on the bank and enjoyed watching the water gurgle into his field. He was now at peace and full of happiness. He went home, called his wife, "Now bring some oil and prepare a smoke." Now he was ready for his breakfast or his lunch and his bath also. In a carefree mood, he took his bath, ate his meal, and retired to bed. And this kind of determination illustrates deep dispassion. So, people with deep dispassion will not be lukewarm in their approach. That is what Sri Ramakrishna is trying to tell Vijay Krishna Goswami. But of course, for most of us, even the ordinary dispassion is such a big problem. The first type of ordinary dispassion which Sri Ramakrishna spoke of, that allowing everything to go by the will of the Lord and keep on taking his name and waiting for his grace. Even if we could do that, it would be a great achievement. Leave alone this kind of dispassion or this kind of yearning. There was another farmer who was also trying to bring water to his field. His wife said to him, "It's already late, come on now. There's no need to work so hard." Without a protest, this fellow put down his spade and said, "Since you say so, I am coming." So all people laughed. So behind this joke also was a great teaching Sri Ramakrishna was trying to give to his devotees. So don't be lukewarm and don't just accede to the request of everybody. People will try to dissuade you from uh, practicing and say, "Are what is there?" Most of the parents will say, "Oh, you are young now. When you grow," the idea is that as only when you grow old and when you are retired, when you are fully free, you should take some time to think about God, and that is enough. So that is why Sri Ramakrishna in the beginning was making fun. He said he has turned 50 and still he is playing cards. So it was a big shock for Sri Ramakrishna. But now, if he sees most of the, fortunately, he had not traveled all over the world. In those days, Calcutta, at least the senior people, senior citizens, I think at least they had the habit of doing their daily prayers and all those things. Now those things have vanished. If you had seen the modern day um, old age home facilities where people will be spending their time not knowing what to do, how to pass their time, and seeing Keshav Chandra Sen's 50-year-old relative is not old by any standards, but anyway, 50-year-old devotee playing cards, it sent, he was absolutely shocked. So for a person, Sri Ramakrishna has set a very high standard, and what he says is mild dispassion for most of us, even that is a daunting task. It is this deep dispassion, or this dispassion which this farmer exhibited, or as he said, when you place, when your head burns, your hair burns, hair is on fire, your head is on fire, at that time you start running and trying to douse it. So those are the examples or imageries which Sri Ramakrishna and all the great leaders gave, and to explain the urgency or the importance of deep dispassion. So just as a farmer can't bring water to his field without great determination, in the same way, only with great effort does a man realize God. Now, chapter 4 starts. We'll take it up next time. If there are some questions, you can ask, because the Vijay Krishna Goswami is still asking questions. But this beautiful verse which Sri Ramakrishna has taken, which M has taken from Bhagavad Gita, second chapter, 70, at the end of almost the last verse of uh, the second chapter, after describing the glory of the Atman, Sri Krishna says, Apuryamanam achala pratishtham samudramapa pravishanti yadvat tadvat kamayam pravishanti sarve sa shantim apnoti na kama kami. In whom? In that person where desires, all the desires enter as waters enter the full unmoving sea, he attains peace. Desire enter means he is not afflicted with desires, all his desires are submerged in the vast ocean. The vast sea has the capacity, when the river of desire is flowing, it can create havoc. But once it touches the sea, you don't even know where it has vanished. In that sense, it is to be understood. The unmoving sea, apparently unmoving, hundreds and hundreds of big rivers daily enter into it, and the sea does not feel it at all. So also, desires may come. Desires may bomb us like these rivers. They may be flowing as fast as these rivers. But no kama kami, not so the desirer of desire. But if people are still attached to their desires, and they don't submerge these desires into the ocean of into their soul, and into convert those desires into the desire or the passion for God, or do not encourage or do not cultivate dispassion like that farmer who said, I'll do it later. Similarly, this verse says, he, that person into whom all the desires are submerged. There are no more desires. Like the waters of the river enter the unmoving sea, he alone attains peace, not the kama kami, not the person who is full of desires, and desires are flowing as if just as the rivers flow. So that then Sri Ramakrishna is just telling Vijay, you used to come here so often. Why not recently? So Vijay says, as usual, householders argument, sir, I want very much to come, but I am not free. I have accepted the work in Brahmo Samaj. So that is why Sri Ramakrishna says that these entanglements, if you go on increasing, then it may be difficult. So at least at a particular age, the takeaway from what we discussed today is, at least at a particular age, this idea of vanaprastha should enter into the life of every human being, and so that he can aspire for a life like this river, all the rivers flowing into the sea, the life of mental sannyasa. So the four ashramas, Brahmacharya ashrama, Grihastha ashrama, Vanaprastha, where Sri Ramakrishna is saying he is turned 50 and yet he is fond is still playing cards to pass his time. So that is why Sri Ramakrishna is trying to impress upon Vijay Krishna Goswami and through him to all of us who, on the pretext of being busy, try to give excuses or give some excuses for not having to practice, not practicing or doing abhyasa. And also, vairagya is out of question because if you are busy, that means there is something which is attracting you. So now the conversation will continue, and Vijay Krishna will Goswami will tell him about the nature of his work, how he is attached, and all those things. And Sri Krishna will try in his own beautiful way to explain how to get rid and how to insulate oneself from the desires and also the attachments and not get bound but be free. So if there are some questions you can ask.